Nobody taught me this when I was younger. Not my parents, not school, not any financial advisor I ever spoke to. I had to learn it the hard way, watching money disappear despite earning more than I ever imagined I would. I remember the exact moment everything clicked. I was standing in my garage surrounded by things, exercise equipment I hadn't touched in 2 years, boxes of electronics with tangled cables, furniture I'd replaced but never discarded, tools for hobbies I'd abandoned, and I realized something that changed my entire relationship with money. All of this was supposed to make my life better. Every single item had been purchased with that intention, and yet here I stood, stressed about finances, working longer hours than I wanted, feeling trapped despite a salary that should have provided freedom. The problem wasn't my income. The problem was everything I was looking at. That realization led me down a path that transformed my financial life completely. Not through earning more, not through complicated investment strategies, through understanding something simpler and more powerful. Today I'm sharing the money rules that emerged from that journey. Rules that have kept me financially stable through job changes, economic downturns, and every curveball life has thrown. Rules that work regardless of what you earn because they address the real source of financial instability. These rules might challenge how you think about money and possessions. They challenged me. But if you apply them consistently, financial stability stops being something you chase and becomes something you simply have. Let me start with the truth that contradicts everything society teaches about success. Your income does not determine your wealth. This sounds wrong because we've been conditioned to believe higher salary equals better financial position. But I've seen too many examples that prove otherwise. A colleague of mine earned nearly 3 times what another friend earned. The high earner drove luxury cars, lived in an impressive home, wore designer clothes. The lower earner drove a 10-year-old sedan, lived in a modest apartment, dressed simply. 5 years later, the high earner was drowning. Credit card debt, car payments eating his paycheck, mortgage he could barely afford. The stress was visible on his face. He couldn't miss a single paycheck without everything collapsing. The lower earner had accumulated over $200,000 in investments. She could have stopped working for 3 years without financial crisis. She slept peacefully. She had options. Same economy, same opportunities, wildly different outcomes. The difference wasn't intelligence or luck or timing. The difference was how each person related to money and possessions. One converted income into lifestyle, the other converted income into freedom. I've seen this pattern repeated dozens of times across different income levels. Teachers with more net worth than doctors. Small business owners more financially secure than corporate executives. The correlation between income and wealth is far weaker than anyone admits. True financial stability depends on how you handle money, not how much arrives. Someone earning $50,000 who keeps 40% builds wealth faster than someone earning $200,000 who spends $210,000. This is the foundation everything else builds on. Income is just raw material. What you construct with that material determines your financial life. And what most people construct is a collection of possessions that quietly drains their wealth without them noticing. Every item you own costs more than its purchase price. This hidden reality explains why people with decent incomes feel perpetually stretched. When you buy something, you pay the sticker price once, but the true cost continues long after the transaction. Space requirements, maintenance, insurance, repairs, mental energy tracking and managing the item, opportunity cost of the money that could have been invested instead. Consider a boat. The purchase price might be $30,000, but then come storage fees, winterization, insurance, fuel, maintenance, registration, equipment upgrades, repairs when something breaks, time spent arranging all of this instead of doing something else. The actual cost of owning that boat over 5 years might be $60,000 or $70,000 when you account for everything. Double the purchase price, and this doesn't include the investment returns that money could have generated. This pattern applies to everything, just at different scales. The larger house costs more to heat, cool, furnish, maintain, insure, and tax. The second car requires insurance, fuel, maintenance, registration, and eventual replacement. The wardrobe of clothes needs closet space, occasional dry cleaning, organization systems, and mental energy deciding what to wear. Even small items accumulate. Kitchen gadgets take cabinet space and require occasional cleaning. Books fill shelves that cost money to buy and space that costs money to rent or own. Hobby equipment needs storage and maintenance even when unused. I once calculated the true annual cost of items I owned, not the purchase price divided over years, the ongoing expenses they created. The number was staggering. Thousands of dollars flowing out annually just to maintain things I rarely used or didn't genuinely need. This is how financial stability erodes invisibly, not through obvious bad decisions, through the accumulated weight of possessions that each take a small bite, together consuming enormous resources. Most people never calculate this. They wonder where money goes while surrounded by the answer, but this isn't about deprivation or living with nothing. The opposite, actually. Living intentionally with possessions builds the freedom that excessive accumulation destroys. This distinction matters because minimalism gets misunderstood as sacrifice when it's actually strategy. Thoughtful choices about what you own create space for savings. Savings create investment opportunities. Investments create passive income. Passive income creates options. Options create freedom. The person who owns less, but owns deliberately, isn't suffering. They're engineering a life where money accumulates instead of dissipates, where each possession serves genuine purpose rather than draining resources, where financial stability becomes automatic rather than struggled for. This isn't about counting possessions or living in empty rooms. It's about ensuring that everything you own earns its place through actual value provided, not just through existing. When you approach possessions this way, something remarkable happens. You stop accumulating automatically. You stop upgrading reflexively. You stop buying to fill emotional voids that purchases can never fill, and the money that would have flowed toward unnecessary things flows instead toward your financial foundation. Deliberate choices prevent lifestyle inflation. Lifestyle inflation is the silent killer of financial stability. It's the tendency for expenses to rise automatically with income, keeping you perpetually at the same level of financial stress regardless of how much you earn. I experienced this directly. Every raise I received seemed to disappear into slightly better versions of things I already had. Slightly nicer apartment, slightly newer car, slightly more expensive restaurants. My lifestyle always expanded to match whatever I earned. The result was running faster on the same treadmill, working harder without accumulating more, earning more without gaining freedom. Intentional ownership breaks this pattern. When you decide in advance what possessions satisfy your needs, additional income flows to wealth building instead of lifestyle expansion. Let me share the specific principles that make this work in practice. The first principle is evaluating true value before any purchase. Ask yourself how often you'll realistically use something compared to what it costs. Not how often you imagine using it. How often you'll actually use it based on honest assessment of your patterns. I wanted a high-end camera for years. I imagined taking beautiful photographs on trips at family events, capturing moments artistically. Finally, I bought one. Expensive. Top quality. In 2 years, I used it maybe 15 times. The photos I took could have come from my phone for practical purposes. The camera sat in a closet representing thousands of dollars of frozen potential that could have been growing in investments. Before that camera, I should have asked, based on my actual behavior, not my fantasy behavior, how often will I use this? The honest answer would have prevented a purchase that provided minimal value relative to its cost. Now, I apply this test rigorously. Cost divided by realistic uses. If the cost per use is higher than I'd pay for that individual use, the purchase doesn't make sense. This simple math has prevented countless acquisitions that would have drained resources without providing proportional benefit. The second principle is questioning replacement. Ask yourself, if this item disappeared today, would I buy it again? This question cuts through the inertia that keeps us owning things we don't actually value. We hold on to possessions because we have them, not because we need them. The replacement question breaks that pattern. Walk through your home mentally, the decorations on shelves, the clothes in closets, the equipment in storage. For each category, ask honestly, if all of this vanished, what would I actually repurchase? Most people discover they'd replace maybe 30 or 40% of what they own. The rest exists through momentum, not necessity. And that excess comes with ongoing costs that erode financial stability. Selling or donating items you wouldn't replace frees up space, reduces maintenance burden, and potentially generates cash for investment. More importantly, it reveals how much you've been carrying that provides no real value. The third principle is avoiding unnecessary upgrades. This one fights against powerful cultural conditioning. We're trained to believe newer is better. That upgrades represent progress, that keeping functional but outdated items somehow reflects poorly on us. I had a phone that worked perfectly, made calls, sent messages, ran every app I used, but a new model appeared with better camera and faster processor, features I didn't need for my actual usage patterns. I upgraded anyway because upgrading felt like the normal thing to do. That unnecessary upgrade cost over $1,000 when you include the phone price, new case, new charger compatibility issues, and time spent transferring everything. $1,000 that could have been invested, growing for decades, becoming significantly more. Now my rule is simple. If what I have still functions for my actual needs, I don't replace it. Not when something newer appears, not when others upgrade, not when marketing tells me I'm missing out. This single principle saves thousands annually, thousands that compound into tens of thousands, eventually hundreds of thousands over a lifetime, all from simply using functional things until they no longer function. The fourth principle transforms behavior through environment design. Make spending harder and saving easier. Willpower is unreliable. I've learned this through repeated failure. Deciding to spend less, save more, buy intentionally, all of this collapses under the friction of daily life if it requires constant conscious decisions. What works instead is structuring your environment, so good financial behavior becomes automatic and bad behavior requires effort. Remove saved credit cards from online stores. The extra step of entering card details creates friction that prevents impulsive purchases. I've abandoned dozens of carts because I couldn't be bothered to get my wallet. Automate transfers to savings and investment accounts the day income arrives. Money you never see in your spending account never feels available to spend. Unsubscribe from retail emails and unfollow brands on social media. Every advertisement is engineered to create desire you didn't have. Reducing exposure reduces artificial want. Delete shopping apps from your phone. If purchasing requires going to a computer, opening a browser, and navigating to a website, you'll purchase less. The friction filters impulsive urges from genuine needs. Create waiting periods for any non-essential purchase over a certain amount. I use a 30-day list. Anything I want goes on the list. If I still want it after 30 days, I consider buying. Most items never get purchased because the initial desire fades. These environmental changes do what willpower cannot. They make good financial behavior the path of least resistance. The fifth principle addresses something most people never do: keeping track of what you own. When you don't know what you have, you accumulate duplicates. You forget about things and buy them again. You lose items in clutter and purchase replacements. The disorganization itself becomes expensive. I once discovered I owned 4 pairs of nearly identical scissors. 4. In different drawers, forgotten, each purchased because I couldn't find the others. This is minor but illustrative. The pattern scales to clothes, tools, supplies, everything. Regularly reviewing possessions prevents this accumulation and waste. You don't need elaborate inventory systems. Simple periodic attention works. Once every few months, I walk through each area of my home with fresh eyes. What's here? Do I use it? Would I buy it again? Does it serve genuine purpose or just occupy space? This practice catches accumulation before it becomes overwhelming. Small, regular reviews prevent the need for massive purges later. The awareness itself changes purchasing behavior because you actually know what you already own. The sixth principle saves money through delayed commitment. Try before you buy. Many purchases can be tested through renting or borrowing before you commit to ownership. This practice confirms whether something provides value matching its cost before you're locked in. I mentioned wanting a nice camera. What I should have done was rent one for a few weeks before purchasing. Actually used it in my real life. Discovered through experience, not imagination, how often I'd actually use it. This applies to many categories. Exercise equipment can often be tried at gyms before buying for home. Tools can be borrowed from neighbours or rented from hardware stores. Hobby equipment can often be rented before investing in your own. The trial period reveals reality that imagination obscures. Sometimes you discover you'll use something constantly and the purchase makes sense. Often you discover the initial enthusiasm fades quickly, and you've saved yourself from an expensive mistake. The seventh principle considers what I call ripple costs. Major purchases create waves of additional expenses that multiply the original price. Buy a larger house and you'll spend more on furniture, utilities, maintenance, decorations, and landscaping. The house triggers dozens of secondary purchases. Buy a boat and you'll spend on accessories, safety equipment, dock fees, transportation, and specialized clothing. The boat pulls money toward itself continuously. Buy an expensive hobby commitment and you'll spend on supplies, upgrades, storage, travel to locations, and membership fees. The initial purchase is just the entry point. Understanding ripple costs prevents surprise at where money goes after major purchases. Before any significant acquisition, list everything else that purchase will likely require or encourage you to buy. Add those costs to the original price, then decide if the total investment makes sense. Often this calculation reveals that the true cost is double or triple the sticker price. Sometimes that's acceptable. But you should know before committing, not discover afterward when financial stability suffers. The eighth principle might be the most important for long-term stability. Define your limits before increasing income. Most people let income determine lifestyle. More money arrives, lifestyle expands to absorb it. This guarantees permanent financial precariousness regardless of earnings, because spending always matches or exceeds income. The alternative is deciding in advance what level of possessions and lifestyle satisfies your genuine needs. Not what you could afford, what actually makes your life good. I did this exercise several years ago. I defined what housing I actually needed for comfort and function. What transportation truly served my life. What possessions genuinely improved my daily experience. What experiences brought lasting satisfaction. The list was shorter and cheaper than what I'd been spending on. Much shorter, much cheaper. With these limits defined, additional income had somewhere constructive to go. Not toward expanding already sufficient lifestyle, toward building wealth that would eventually make work optional. Knowing what is sufficient prevents endless spending. Without this definition, no amount is ever enough because lifestyle expands infinitely to absorb whatever you earn. The ninth principle reframes what you're actually building. Focus on freedom over accumulation. Possessions are not wealth. They're often the opposite. They consume wealth in their acquisition and maintenance while providing diminishing returns on satisfaction. Actual wealth is measured by flexibility, opportunities, and choices. Can you leave a job that makes you miserable? Can you take extended time off when life requires it? Can you pursue interests that don't pay well but fulfill you deeply? Can you handle emergencies without financial catastrophe? Can you help family members in crisis? These capabilities represent financial health. Visible possessions often represent financial fragility disguised as success. I've started measuring my financial position not by what I own, but by what I could do. How many months could I survive without income? What opportunities could I pursue that require financial runway? What risks could I absorb without disaster? This measurement shifted my behavior profoundly. Instead of acquiring things, I accumulate capability. Instead of expanding lifestyle, I expand options. The result is genuine security rather than the illusion of prosperity that impressive possessions create. The 10th principle creates sustainable practice. Declutter regularly through small consistent reviews rather than overwhelming purges. Major cleanouts feel productive but rarely create lasting change. You spend a weekend filling donation bags, feel accomplished, then gradually reaccumulate because underlying patterns haven't changed. Regular small reviews work better. 10 minutes weekly examining one category, one drawer, one shelf, one closet section. Consistent minor attention that keeps accumulation from building. This practice becomes habit rather than project. You maintain intentional ownership continuously instead of letting things build until crisis forces action. The effort feels minimal because it is minimal, but the cumulative effect is profound. My home stays at roughly the same possession level year after year because small regular reviews catch additions before they accumulate. Nothing builds up because everything gets examined before it can. Now let me address something that explains why these rules work at a deeper level than just financial math. Possessions affect your psychology in ways you might not recognize. Clutter and excess create stress and consume mental energy, even when you're not consciously thinking about them. Your brain processes your environment constantly. When that environment contains chaos, disorder, and things requiring attention, cognitive resources get consumed managing that chaos. You have less mental energy for everything else, including financial decisions. I noticed this dramatically when I simplified my living space, reduced visual clutter, eliminated items requiring maintenance attention, created clean surfaces and organized storage. My thinking became clearer, my stress decreased measurably, my capacity for deliberate financial choices increased. This isn't mystical, it's practical psychology. Reducing environmental demands frees mental resources. Those resources become available for better decisions in all areas, including money. The emotional dimension matters too. Impulsive purchases often arise from insecurity, boredom, or emotional voids, rather than genuine need. Buying becomes a coping mechanism that creates temporary pleasure while building long-term financial instability. Understanding this pattern helps interrupt it. When you feel the urge to purchase something unplanned, ask what emotion is driving the desire. Often it's not actually about the item, it's about something else entirely that buying cannot solve. I've caught myself wanting to buy things when I'm stressed, lonely, or feeling inadequate. The purchase would have temporarily distracted from these feelings without addressing them, and later I'd still have the feelings plus less money plus more possessions requiring attention. Clear rules and systems reduce dependence on willpower for these moments. You don't have to make good decisions when emotional if your environment and principles make good decisions automatic. The waiting list I mentioned earlier serves this purpose. Impulsive emotional purchases go on the list where the 30-day delay allows emotions to settle. By the time the waiting period ends, the emotional driver has usually faded and the rational assessment becomes possible. All of these principles create something greater than their individual effects. Reducing unnecessary spending allows more savings. This is obvious. More savings create security. Also obvious, but security reduces the urge to spend for emotional reasons. This is the part people miss. When you feel financially secure, you don't need purchases to feel successful or worthy. The security itself provides what impulsive buying was trying to provide, so you spend less, which increases savings, which increases security, which reduces spending further. This compounding effect gradually strengthens financial freedom and control. The rules reinforce each other, creating a positive cycle that accelerates over time. Compare this to the opposite cycle most people experience. Financial stress creates emotional discomfort. Emotional discomfort triggers spending for temporary relief. Spending depletes savings. Depleted savings increase financial stress, which triggers more emotional spending. The negative cycle also compounds, accelerating toward financial instability. Which cycle you're in depends largely on whether you've adopted rules like these. The rules break the negative cycle and initiate the positive one. Once positive momentum builds, maintaining stability becomes easier rather than harder. Let me be clear about what wealth actually means in this framework. Real wealth is not measured by visible items, not cars, not houses, not wardrobes, not any of the things people display to signal success. Real wealth is measured by flexibility, opportunities, and choices. Can you leave a job that's destroying your health without immediate financial catastrophe? That's wealth. Can you take a year off to handle a family crisis without losing everything you've built? That's wealth. Can you move to a new city for an opportunity without financial constraint? That's wealth. Can you pursue work that pays less but fulfills you deeply? That's wealth. Can you retire years earlier than conventional expectations? That's wealth. Freedom to make choices based on what matters rather than financial necessity. That's what these rules build. Minimalist practices convert excess possessions into this freedom and optionality. Every unnecessary thing you don't buy becomes capacity for choice. Every item you sell reclaims resources for genuine priorities. The trade is always the same. Less stuff, more freedom. I used to own many things and have few choices. Now I own fewer things and have many choices. This trade has made me happier than any possession ever did. For practical implementation, let me summarize the steps that create financial stability. Examine all your belongings and identify what truly matters. Do this honestly. What improves your life? What exists through momentum alone? What would you replace if it disappeared? What drains resources without providing proportional value? Delay or pause purchases to avoid impulse buying. The waiting list approach. The friction systems. Whatever creates space between desire and action so rational assessment becomes possible. Track and limit items in categories prone to overaccumulation. Clothes, electronics, Kitchen items, books, hobby supplies. Whatever you tend to accumulate beyond what you need, decide in advance what level of possessions and lifestyle satisfies your needs before income increases, before opportunity for lifestyle inflation. Define sufficiency so excess has somewhere constructive to go. Make reviewing and adjusting possessions a regular habit. Small, consistent attention rather than crisis-driven purges. Sustainable practice that maintains intentional ownership continuously. These steps are not dramatic. They don't require transformation overnight. They're practices that build gradually into financial stability that feels almost automatic once established. The core insight underlying everything is this: thoughtful ownership and spending habits allow anyone to build financial security, not just high earners, anyone. Because security comes from the gap between income and expenses, not from the income number itself. Owning fewer things can increase your freedom, peace of mind, and long-term wealth. This sounds paradoxical until you've experienced it, then it becomes obvious. Minimalism enables you to control your life rather than being controlled by possessions. The things you own either serve you or enslave you. There's no neutral relationship. I wasted years being enslaved by things I thought I wanted, working to maintain a lifestyle that didn't actually make me happy, trading hours of my life for items that depreciated while my investments could have been growing. The rules I've shared are what I discovered works. They're not complicated. They don't require special knowledge or high income or unusual discipline. They require only the willingness to see possessions differently and act accordingly. Financial stability isn't something that happens to you. It's something you create through thousands of small decisions made well. These rules guide those decisions toward outcomes that accumulate into security and freedom. Write in the comments which rule resonates most strongly with your situation. What area of your financial life needs this kind of attention first? Sometimes naming the challenge begins the solution. Share this with someone who feels trapped by financial instability despite working hard and earning reasonably. The solution might not be earning more. It might be owning less. The equation is simple, even if execution requires practice. Less stuff. More money, more freedom. Start today. Even one rule applied consistently will begin changing your financial life. The stability you want is built from these choices. One possession evaluated honestly. One purchase delayed thoughtfully. One item released deliberately. The rules work. Apply them.